What's up, everybody? Welcome to today's edition of Everyday Discipline, where we decode, deconstruct, and reverse engineer self-discipline for you to get whatever it is you want in your life. My name is Brent Kokel. I'm your host. As always, love it when you guys are here on the show with me. I'm going to revisit something in today's episode. It's part of a saga of home improvement around my house and how that relates to a really powerful lesson that you're going to be able to use to propel a lot of things in your life forward. Basically, how this whole show works is I do something, I screw it up, I get a lesson out of it, and then we talk about how you can apply that into your own life. Ultimately, in the framework of discipline, which is just doing what you already know that you need to do in order to get the result that you actually want. Too often we say that we want to do things and then we just don't do them for whatever reason, like whatever excuse or story you have that comes up for why you can't do something that you know that you need to do. That's essentially a lack of self-discipline, and discipline's the skill. It's the one thing that will get you everything else that you want in your life. Wherever you want to go, discipline is the way to do it. So there's this saga about me hanging some lights in my house. I did an episode on this last week, but this is a continuation of that one. Actually, if you're not just an audio only listener and you're listening on YouTube, I will put it in the pop-out banner right there. You can watch this if you want first. So in any event, what we've got here is we have got a situation where my wife says that our lighting in our house is outdated. And we've got this really long hallway and these lights that are hanging down, and they're like really beautiful lights. When you turn them on at night, the glass is in such a way where it's like a dome of glass on the bottom that it looks like the walls are underwater. Like, they're super cool, but still she doesn't like them, so she wants me to change them out. I go and I change the first one out last weekend, and there are 5 in this hallway. I don't know, maybe it's like 30 feet long. And I change out the first one and it takes me like 90 minutes to do. And I'm cursing, this is like an 18 F-bomb project to change out one of these light bulbs. Or not light bulbs, light fixtures. If it took me 18 F-bombs to change out a light bulb, then fuck my life. But it did this for light fixtures, so about 90 minutes to do one of them. So last weekend, I had to do the remaining 4, because there are 5 total light fixtures that go up on this thing. They're all flush mount, and oh, by the way, there isn't really like that space in the electrical box up top, because for whatever reason, all the original fixtures were put into a 2x4. Like, there's a 2x4 running the entire length of this hallway right down the middle, and that's where all the light fixtures hit. So I don't even have space to like put wires and hide them and all that sort of shit. So this is definitely a task, at least for somebody with my lack of skill set when it comes to doing stuff like that around the house. This was a challenge. So I had 4 of them I had to do this weekend, knowing that it was 90 minutes each last weekend, or 90 minutes for one, and 18 F-bombs. I'm sitting there going like, babe, you got to take the kids out of the house, because this is going to sound like a motherfucking Eddie Murphy concert from like, or a stand-up comedian like back in the day. I'm thinking about putting on red leather like he had in Delirious, or maybe the purple shit from Raw when I go about doing it. So I go to do this. And the funniest thing happens when I open the box of the first one that I was going to put up this weekend. There's a little piece of paper that fell out. And that little piece of paper had these magical things called instructions. Yeah, they were actually telling me how to hang the light. And as it turns out, the one that took me 90 minutes and I cursed F-bombs 18 times while I was doing it, well, it turns out I wasn't exactly doing it right. Because the particular lights that I was hanging up actually came in 3 different pieces. You had the piece that flush mount to the ceiling. Then you had a piece that was a casing that flush mounted to the thing that flush mounted to the ceiling. And then underneath that, you had a 3rd piece that also came off that held the glass underneath it, because the light is diffused. These lights are all so cool. They don't make it look like you're underwater, but they're still pretty cool. So there are 3 pieces to light, and I was putting up just one piece. I actually read the instructions. I actually followed the instructions. And my goodness gracious, if we didn't put that light up in 20 minutes, and then the next one put up in 20 minutes, and the next one 20 minutes, and I finished it off in another one that took me, yes, 20 minutes, all because I read the directions. So here's the lesson inside of this, guys. Don't just start the journey, ask for directions first. Don't just start the journey, ask for directions first. So often we get caught up in this trap that just says, I've got to go, I've got to go, I've got to go. It's time for me to do something about this. And we start off on a trajectory and we're doing a lot of work, but it's not giving us a lot of result. And so therefore we feel like, oh, I just must be doing more work. This is where we get into the hustle culture and the grind culture, where it's like, I'm constantly working, I'm constantly doing things just because we want to get started. And people just start doing shit all the time. They start doing like tons of tactics out there. Here's a good example of it. This was back in the day when I worked for another company, and our CEO decided it'd be a great idea if we had a Facebook page, particularly his Facebook page. Didn't really know what to do with a Facebook page, didn't know how to leverage it in order to promote the business, didn't know how to leverage it in terms of getting prospects or getting sales conversations or getting clients or even communicating with our existing clients about anything that mattered to them. None of that was really in the picture. It wasn't really in the strategy. There was nothing about that. It was just like, hey, Facebook's a thing. We need to have a Facebook page. So you can tell that this was probably like mid 2000s, but it didn't do anything. Of course it didn't do anything because we never really understood what it meant and what we needed it to do. But it's interesting that that experience bookends with an experience I had with a client company that I was consulting with last year, where it's very similar. So the CEO's sitting there, and this is probably a $6.5 million company. And the CEO's sitting there in a leadership team meeting, and I'm sitting there on Zoom listening to the leadership team meeting. And the CEO says, hey, we need to start posting a lot more content on Instagram. Ironically, this was a company in a similar space to what I've just talked about. But in any event, so he said, we need to post more native content on Instagram. And everybody's like, oh yeah, what kind of content do you want? Well, we want pictures of our product, we want pictures of our clients, we want this. And I kind of stopped everything and I said, well, what are we trying to accomplish with this? And it was dead silent. But it's a simple question, isn't it? But at the same time, it's the hardest question that you could possibly get. What are you really trying to do here? And it's one that just stumped me. It stumped me when somebody asked me that once. It was one of my first mentors who said, like, what are you trying to build here? And I was like, oh shit, how can I not even answer the first question that you asked me? But it's a legitimate question that we don't ask nearly enough. What are you really trying to do here? See, it goes back to the way that we just act based on a whole bunch of tactical shit, and it feels like we're not getting anywhere. And I'm gonna have you consider that it feels like you're not getting anywhere because there isn't a destination of where you ultimately want to go. So if we look at it like this, and this is from The Art of War, if anybody's read this book, but it's relevant to everything that we do in our lives. And it's so funny how many things come from The Art of War where it's like, yeah, that's relevant. Oh, that's relevant too. Oh, wait, there's another one that's relevant. All of this stuff comes from The Art of War. So there is a way to go about planning something, and it starts out with the mission, the end game of what you are trying to accomplish. And the example that I use for this is that when the attacks of September 11th came, the United States said, all right, man, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to blame Iraq and we're going to invade their country. And what we're going to do is we are going to take Saddam Hussein out of power. We're going to make sure he doesn't have weapons of mass destruction. And we're also going to try to leave a stable government behind that'll play nicely with Americans. Let's just say that that was the strategy. I'm not sure that, or that the mission. I'm not sure that that was everything in it, but I think you'll agree that that's probably most of it. So we've got those things. Well, what does that do when it comes to like, how do we accomplish this? AKA the strategy. Well, it takes something off the table, doesn't it? We can't just go in there and drop 15 nukes on Iraq, turn the entire country into a mushroom cloud and be on our way, because that wouldn't accomplish the third part of the mission, which is to leave a stable government behind that wants to play nicely with Americans. Understanding that, it helps us figure out what the strategy actually needed to be. So our strategy is that we're going to send in small teams and they're going to paint targets of military importance with lasers. And then what we're going to do is we're going to launch Tomahawk cruise missiles from the Persian Gulf, and we're going to take out all their infrastructure and all of that before we send anybody in. Cool, that's our strategy. Okay, great. Now we go tactically and we go, well, what places do we need to hit? What types of teams do we need to have? Which branch of the military is going to paint these targets? Which branch of the military is going to be responsible for blowing up these targets? How many missiles do we need? How many lasers do we need? How many guys? How many AMRAPs? How many food, like MREs, like all the shit that they needed? Those are all tactical. But they wouldn't have made any sense if we didn't understand the mission first. There's so many places right now in your life that you're simply acting and you're taking action on tactics without a clear mission. How often have you heard of somebody in waking up in their 30s or 40s and say, like, this isn't the life that I thought I would have. I thought my life would be totally different than this. My answer when that comes up for me is I say like, well, what were you trying to build? And more often than not, I just get silence. Because people don't think about the mission. They might think about their strategy, maybe, but most often they're just thinking about tactics. So you can't just start the journey, you have to ask for directions first. And that doesn't even mean that you need to ask for directions from an outside source. You can ask them from yourself. But just get clear, what am I really trying to do here? This applies everywhere, guys. It's easy in business to think about like, what am I trying to do? But what are you really trying to do in your relationships? Like, what do you really want out of those things? Wildly different strategies depending on what you want. Same thing in your body. It's like, what do you really want here? Because there's wildly different strategies based on how you want to look and what you want. If you want all health, we're going to have a way different strategy than we're going to have if you want all fitness and looking good naked. Going to be way different because those two things are not the same. See, it's not hard once you figure out what you want. The trouble is finding what you want and identifying your overall mission. So as I close this episode down, I'm going to leave you with your action item of the day. And for those of you guys that are listening to this for the first time, there is something that you have to do at the end of every episode. I don't want you to just listen to this, go on to the next show and say, okay, cool, that was great. I want you to do something about it, because if you're here, you've invested some time and you might as well push your life forward as a result of it. So here's your action of the day. Take just one domain of your life. I don't care if that is business. I don't care if that's body. I don't care if that's balance, which is relationships, or being, which is your spirituality. Probably easiest to do this in business or in body. And say, what am I really trying to do here? That question itself has the power to fundamentally change the rest of your life once you get clear on it. But I do need to warn you that it's not easy to get clear on. I'll still get stumbled by this question every now and then because it requires intention and it requires a whole lot of thought. So I'm going to leave you guys to go do that right now. And hey, if you haven't yet, please do me a favor and give me a rating on whatever platform you're listening to this on. Certainly helps from an algorithm standpoint for more people to find the show. I obviously want more people to find the show because I feel like there's a lot of people that struggle just doing what they said that they would do and what they know they need to do to get the results that they want in their life. I don't want anybody to have to experience that. So the more people that listen, the absolute better. So please do give me a rating. That certainly helps me out. And as always, guys, I'm going to do my job and come back next time. I want you to do your job and you come back too.